My name is Maria. I'm 29 years old, and I've been a nurse for 6 years. I work the night shift at a mid-sized hospital in Indiana. It's not the most glamorous job, but I've always loved the quiet of the night. But one night, something happened that I can't forget. It was a Wednesday night, and my shift had started like any other. Around midnight, I was assigned to monitor Mr. Green, an elderly patient recovering from hip surgery. He was 78, frail, and polite, thanking me softly whenever I adjusted his IV or fluffed his pillow. Around 2 a.m., I went to check on him again. His room was dark, lit only by the glow of the monitors. But when I stepped inside, my heart sank. His bed was empty. The blanket was tossed aside, and the IV pole stood there like a ghost. At first, I thought maybe he'd gone to the bathroom. Though it didn't make sense. He couldn't walk unassisted, and there was no walker or wheelchair in sight. I knocked gently on the bathroom door. Mr. Green. No response. I opened the door. It was empty. Panic crept in. I checked the hallway outside his room. It was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. I flagged down another nurse, Sarah, and asked if she'd seen him. She shook her head, just as confused as I was. We began searching nearby rooms and halls, but there was no sign of him. It was as if he'd vanished. The hospital has security cameras, so we alerted the night guard to check the footage. I stood behind him in the security office, my stomach in knots. The grainy screen showed Mr. Green shuffling out of his room, still in his hospital gown. He moved slowly, dragging one foot behind the other, as if being pulled by something unseen. "How is he walking?" I whispered. It didn't make sense. We followed his figure as he made his way down the hall, past the nurse's station, and toward the exit. The guard switched to the outdoor cameras, and there he was, stepping into the parking lot. The gown flapped around his thin legs in the wind. He paused, turning his head slightly, as if listening to something. And then the screen went black. The guard cursed, trying to rewind the footage, but it was no use. The camera had cut out, right as Mr. Green disappeared into the darkness. We searched the hospital grounds, but he was nowhere to be found. The police were called, and I spent the rest of the night answering their questions, trying to piece together how a man who couldn't even stand without help had managed to leave the building on his own. 2 days later, they found him. His body was discovered in a wooded area about a mile from the hospital. He was still wearing his hospital gown, though it was torn and dirty. The official report said he'd died of exposure, but the autopsy revealed something more chilling. Signs of restraint around his wrists and ankles, like he'd been tied up. There were faint bruises on his arms, as if someone had been gripping him tightly. The police couldn't explain it. They ruled out an abduction. No one had seen anything suspicious on the hospital grounds, and the footage didn't show anyone else near him. It was as if he'd been let out by something, or someone, that didn't leave a trace. I couldn't shake the guilt. Should I have checked on him sooner? Could I have done something to stop him from leaving? The questions ate at me, keeping me awake during the day when I should have been sleeping. But it was more than just guilt. There was something else, a nagging feeling that I'd missed something important. A week after his death, I was back on the night shift. I was walking past Mr. Green's old room when I noticed the door was slightly ajar. The room had been cleaned and prepped for the next patient, but it felt off, like the air was heavier in there. I stepped inside, just to reassure myself. The bed was neatly made, the machines were turned off, and everything seemed normal. But then I saw it. On the window, faintly etched into the condensation from the cold night air, were 4 words. It wasn't my choice. My blood ran cold. I backed out of the room, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I wanted to believe it was a prank, maybe another nurse messing with me. But deep down, I knew better. I still work the night shift, but I avoid that wing whenever I can. I tell myself it was just a freak incident, a tragedy that had nothing to do with me. But every time I walk those halls, I feel it, a presence, watching, waiting. And I can't help but wonder if Mr. Green was trying to warn me, or if whatever took him is still here, looking for its next victim. My name is Adam. I'm 34 years old, and I've been working as a hospital janitor for almost 10 years now. I'm not a doctor or a nurse, but I've seen enough strange things during my night shifts to last a lifetime. I work at a hospital in a quiet town in Ohio, where things rarely get exciting, or so I thought. What happened on one particular night still sends chills down my spine, and no matter how hard I try to forget, the memory keeps coming back. It was a Tuesday night, and my shift started like any other. The hospital was quieter than usual, and most of the staff were either at the nurse's station or attending to the few patients on the lower floors. My job that night was to clean the 4th floor, which was currently under renovation. The floor had been shut down for months, and it was mostly a ghost town of empty rooms, construction materials, and dust-covered plastic sheets. I wasn't thrilled about working up there alone, but I'd done it before. Around midnight, I grabbed my cleaning supplies and headed to the 4th floor. The hallway lights were dim, and the air felt heavy, like the kind of silence that presses on your ears. As I pushed my cleaning cart down the hall, I noticed something odd. A light was on in one of the rooms at the far end. That didn't make sense. All the rooms were supposed to be sealed off, and no one was allowed up there except maintenance staff. Curious, and admittedly a little uneasy, I walked toward the room. The door was slightly ajar, and through the crack, I could see a figure sitting at the desk. It was a man in a white lab coat, hunched over a stack of files, scribbling something on a clipboard. I figured he was a doctor who'd wandered up here by mistake. "Excuse me, sir," I called out. My voice echoed down the empty hallway. The man didn't respond. He just kept writing, his head tilted down as if he hadn't heard me. I stepped closer, knocking lightly on the doorframe. "Sir, this floor is closed. You're not supposed to be here." Still, nothing. His movements were mechanical, almost too slow, as he flipped a page and kept writing. Something about him felt wrong. His face was pale, almost gray, and his eyes didn't blink. I felt a knot forming in my stomach. The air in the room was ice cold, even colder than the rest of the floor. I backed out of the room, my hands shaking. I didn't know what else to do, so I turned and walked quickly back to the stairwell. By the time I reached the main floor, I was practically running. I found my supervisor, Mr. Langley, sitting at the security desk, sipping coffee. "There's someone on the 4th floor," I blurted out. "A doctor or something. He's in one of the rooms. I think you should check the cameras." Mr. Langley frowned. "Nobody's supposed to be up there," he said. He pulled up the camera feed for the 4th floor. We both leaned in, watching the grainy black and white footage. The hallway was empty. "Are you sure you saw someone?" he asked, giving me a skeptical look. "Yes," I said firmly. He was sitting at the desk, writing something. "Check again." Mr. Langley rewound the footage and played it back, but there was no sign of anyone. The hallway had been empty the whole time. My stomach churned. "Maybe you're tired," he said. "Go grab a coffee and take a breather. I'll send someone up to double-check." I nodded, though I knew what I'd seen. I wasn't imagining it. The rest of the night passed uneventfully, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The next morning, as my shift ended, I overheard a commotion near the hospital's main entrance. Police cars were parked outside, and officers were talking to hospital staff. I lingered nearby, trying to catch bits of the conversation. That's when I heard it. They'd found the body of Dr. Matthew Harris, a surgeon who'd been missing for 2 days. His body had been discovered in a locked room on the 4th floor, the same room where I'd seen the man the night before. My heart dropped. The details didn't make sense. Dr. Harris had been dead for at least 48 hours, according to the police report. But I'd seen someone in that room. Someone alive, or at least moving. When I tried to tell the officers what I'd seen, they dismissed it as a mistake or a trick of the mind, but I knew what I saw. The man in the lab coat wasn't Dr. Harris. Whoever, or whatever, was in that room didn't belong there. I've worked a lot of night shifts since then, but I never go near the 4th floor. Sometimes I hear footsteps coming from above, or the faint sound of a door creaking open. The staff says it's just the building settling, but I'm not so sure. Every now and then, I think about that man at the desk. Was he trying to tell me something? Or was he waiting for someone? Someone like me to notice him? I don't know, and honestly, I don't want to find out. My name is Beth Collins. I'm 26 years old and work as a night nurse at Street Mercy's Hospital in Oregon. I moved here a few months ago to start fresh. I've always liked the calm of night shifts, until 2 weeks ago, when everything changed. It started on my 3rd night. I was getting ready for my shift when I opened my locker and found a note. "I'm watching you." It was written on a torn piece of paper in shaky handwriting. At first, I thought it was a prank from the other nurses. New girl hazing, maybe. I crumpled it up, threw it away, and laughed it off. Hospitals can be tense places, and people cope in weird ways. But then things got strange. The next night, my pen disappeared from the nurse's station. That wasn't a big deal. Pens go missing all the time. But when my ID badge vanished the following night, I started to feel uneasy. I always kept it clipped to my scrubs. I had to get a replacement, which was annoying, but I convinced myself I was just being forgetful. Then, a few nights later, my lunch went missing from the fridge. It wasn't much. A turkey sandwich and some yogurt. But it was mine. The fridge had a camera, but of course, it wasn't working that night. That's when I started feeling like someone was deliberately messing with me. By the 5th night, I was on edge. Every creak in the hallway made my heart race. Shadows in the corner of my vision made my stomach twist. I even joked about it to Tony, one of the security guards. "Maybe we've got a ghost who likes sandwiches," I said. He laughed, but deep down, I wasn't laughing. Then everything came to a head. It was around 2:30 a.m., and my shift had already ended, but I stayed late to finish some paperwork. The hospital was dead silent, except for the hum of the fluorescent lights and the occasional beep of a monitor. As I walked to the supply closet, I heard a faint rustling noise. At first, I thought it was the janitor. But the sound wasn't the usual cleaning. It was soft, deliberate, almost like someone shuffling. I froze. My first instinct was to walk away, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Slowly, I pushed the door open. What I saw made my blood run cold. A man was crouched in the corner of the closet, his arms wrapped around his knees. His face was pale, his hair unkempt, and his eyes, wide, bloodshot, and staring right at me. "Beth," he said, his voice low and cracked. "I missed you." I couldn't breathe. My brain scrambled to place his face, but I didn't recognize him. "Who are you?" I managed to whisper, my voice barely audible. He tilted his head, giving me a strange, crooked smile. "It's me. Don't you remember? We were so good together." My heart pounded as I stepped backward. I fumbled for my phone, but before I could call for help, he lunged. His cold, clammy hand wrapped around my wrist, and his grip was like a vice. I screamed, loud enough to echo through the hallway. Within seconds, Tony and another security guard burst into the room. They tackled the man to the ground as he thrashed and screamed my name over and over. The police came and took him away. He claimed to be my ex-boyfriend, though I'd never seen him before in my life. What was even more disturbing was the revelation that he had been living in the hospital for days, hiding in unused rooms and closets, watching me, and stealing my things. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, when I returned to my locker, I found another note waiting for me. It said, "I'll be back."